All right. So I'm Mike Turner, and today we're talking about a question. We're starting off by what if you could build passive income for life? This is actually something that it's talked about by lots of investors. Everyone talks about financial freedom, but really their plan to get there sucks. But the reason why I know, because I've tried most of them. I've been at this real estate game for 20 plus years. And I'm going to go through and explain to you exactly, how I kind of can't figure this stuff out so you can kind of see the why and then the how. Okay. So you could do it yourself. If you have questions, hold them, put them in the chat. I will address them at the end. We'll do a Q&A at the end. Okay. With that, here we go. So the question, what if you could build passive income for life? I wanted this when I was 16 years old. I'm almost 50, but I used to joke about it with my parents, like, I want to retire early. How do you do that? And they would just laugh. And they're like, you just have to work hard and but retiring early, unless you win the lottery, that's kind of how that, nobody really knows how to do it. You just know that it's possible that some people actually do it. So there's a real estate myth that, we're all taught the same strategy, leverage debt so you can buy more assets and then hope for appreciation. And obviously, we're trying to get cash flow. We're trying to do the right things in real estate. And debt does help us acquire more real estate assets. It does. And that's why it's actually, it's worked for a lot of people to, be able to acquire real estate. But but it's the main thing that actually, sinks their ship is that debt is this thing that, like, yes, can help you launch you, but then it's gonna the thing that breaks you at the same time. As soon as the market shifts significantly, all that debt is this like a massive liability. And yeah, if you're a multi-millionaire, leverage debt for tax, strategies, great idea. But for the typical person, right, who's trying to climb, who's trying to get to the multimillionaire status, right, is trying to leverage any opportunity they can, this is the thing that breaks us. And I've not only been working at this for the last 20 plus years, I, was a real estate broker for 15 years, specifically working with real estate investors. And I just saw this repeated happen over and over and over again. So there's a better way, and I'm going to show you how to do this tonight. Okay. So the new rule of wealth building to create consistent cash flow, you must learn how to leverage people, not just the property. So this is what loans do, right? They leverage the property and and that means you got to, like, your partner, on it is a bank. That's who you're partnering with on your real estate investments, right? That the bank. And and they suck as a partner because you know, they they don't have any kind of flexibility, right? You're late one time and they, like, mess up your shit like big time, right? Like your credit card score just goes down by like 150 points if you're just late on a mortgage. It's nuts. So doing joint venture partnerships is really the key. Now, joint ventures have been around forever, but people don't use them the way that they should. And and so that's what I'm going to lean into because I ignored this forever. I, of course, done joint venture partners, partnerships on deals forever. It's like, yeah, let's split this or whatever. But it's it's so underrated, and I'm going to show you how to do it in a way where it's easier to find partners and that you both win exponentially. Okay. All right. So the debt trap, right? This is the first thing I had to figure out. And I had to, and this happened because I had to start over twice, all the way over, not like beyond zero. That's what happens when, you just get your butt kicked by the market, right? It's just like it takes you beyond zero. You're like massive in debt. And so I started my real estate journey in 2004 and I hit it with as hard as I could. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and I was in like Finn. I was like, yes. I left my W-2. I went all in. I had some equity in the house that I owned and I leveraged that and I just got started and had some early wins and I just kept doubling down and tripling down and I was doing really good. I was actually making smart decisions. And coming into 2008, I knew there was going to be a housing correction. I did. Um, what I didn't realize is how bad it was going to be. I didn't realize that all my tenants were going to stop paying at once. I didn't realize that all my clients, I had a lot of people I helped buy investment property. I was gonna have to watch them like lose everything. It was like the worst, darkest time. Oh my gosh, it was a really tough period of time. And it's hard to kind of go through that and not be impacted. And I was, right? But I kind of, I recovered. I never went back to, I stayed in real estate. I just fought my way through and climbed back up. And by, 2018, 2019, I was doing really well. And in fact, in 2019, I sold my real estate brokerage and I went all in 100% in real estate investing. So I was flipping houses mostly, and I'm good at it, right? I could find properties and I was making money. And of course, in 2021, kind of that backside of COVID, I I made so much money. I was shocked. And and so I was like, wow, I finally figured it out. I paid off my house, I paid off all my old debts. I'm like, yeah, thank goodness I finally figured this out. And then here rolls 2022. And the year started at like a 3% interest rate. Within a few months, we're at 7%. And at that time, I had acquired like six, seven, eight different homes to flip. And when I saw the interest rate skyrocket, I knew I was in trouble. And my market got really rocked by this. Pretty much, it was like the equivalent of all the homes in the area becoming twice as expensive within a few months for anybody who was financing. And so I tried to get through them as fast as I could. I even tried to wholesale some of them off, and I got rid of every single one of them, but most of them I sold at a loss, so I could pay back my lenders in full. It took away all the gains I made the previous year. So I was like, okay, I'm playing the wrong game. And we know the game is like this is the thing with real estate. Like you can make massive paychecks, but if you're not, you know, have some way to have some sort of consistency with it, then it's a trap, right? It's basically it's a feast or famine, feast or famine, feast or famine. And I know a lot of real estate investors. I'm a part of some very expensive masterminds, and I've seen people have lots of success. But you know what I also see with them? Stress, a lot of it, because to keep that momentum going, to keep that either they have a ton of liability or they have this machine, like some of them have like call centers because they're wholesaling this thing, properties, or they have this massive machine because they're doing, you have to kind of create a machine to get consistency. And this that is what kind of eats them up. And yeah, they're high rolling, but that could all go away. And so I didn't want them. I go to these masterminds, it's like, you know what? You guys are making 5, 10x what I'm making, but I don't want your life. I don't want your business. And so I quit the mastermind because like this isn't what I want to build. I want something else. And so I had to come up with a different plan. And having that final straw of like, of losing it twice, basically, I needed to come up with something else. And so I said, all right, I'm going to figure out how to survive and move forward and reach my goals. But I'm going to figure it out how to do without debt. And I've been doing this for so long that I'm just going to figure it out. I'm going to stop following and I'm going to stop figuring it out and testing and do my own kind of tests. And I lucked out. I lucked out because something happened to me and I kind of found my way into mobile homes, which is this asset class that I have avoided like the plague. I mean, I I drive by the mobile home parks all the time. I'm like, no, and I, of course, have helped people acquire some parks over the years. And I was just like, gosh, the management on that thing, I was just like, no thanks. Didn't want anything to do with it. Um, and I knew the reputation of these things, like they're hard to sell. They devalue. You can't finance them. You got to deal with lot rents, and you got to be close to your neighbors. But what happened was my mother-in-law was moving to town, and she had some amount of cash. And she's like, "All right, I want to be close to you guys. I want to be close to downtown, ideally walking distance to a nice park. This is what I like, and here's my budget." And I was like, that doesn't exist in Boise, Idaho. It's totally expensive here now. Unless, you wanted a mobile home. She's like, I might consider that. I'm like, oh, all right, well, let me look around. And so I did, and I used all my, you know, real estate skills, and I found a deal in a really nice park in a really cool area. I mean, this park is surrounded by like $1 million properties. Like, at least probably the lowest one you can find around there is 500,000. And I bought a mobile home for 45,000 and right off the MLS. Okay. And it needed some love. It was a little bit of like an estate sale, but it wasn't like, dirty. It was just dated, And so I was like, all right, this is a great deal. I did some comps and I found some other comps that were selling around 80, 90, and I was like, this is a good deal. But then I made a mistake because I showed her, the property before I fixed it up. And which of course I was going to do. And I was like, I'm going to fix this up. I'm going to make this really cute. And she's like looking around like, nope, this is not what I want. No, thank you. And I'm like, are you sure? Because I can make this really cool. And she's like, no. I'm like, are you triple sure you can walk to the park? You can so close to her house. This checks all the boxes. No. All right. Well, I already bought it, so no big deal. I'll just fix it up and sell it. So that's what I did. And so, and I made 50,000 net, over 50,000 on it. Um, I couldn't believe it. I sold it for like 129 or something like that. It was nuts. And I was like, wow, mobile homes. What the heck? That just cost me 1/5 of the cost as it normally does for a fix and flip investment. Is this too good to be true? So I did another one. I went looking for another one and I found one. And same results, like killed it again. I'm like, whoa, all right, mobile homes. All right, I like this. Why is this going on? And I realized because for years, I did a radio show on real estate every week for like 10 years. And I always had to have something to talk about. So I got in the habit of studying the real estate market. So I'd have something to talk about when I was on the air for an hour. And so I'm really good at research. And so what I did was I started looking into the mobile homes, like what's really going on here? How come this thing's be such a good asset now? And they're not appreciating it. And I looked at across my market, and they're all going up and up and up to kind of follow the same trend as all the rest of the real estate there in town. And so what I did was, so what I figured out was, is that, here's it is in a nutshell. Okay. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? So all, for while mobile homes kind of came on the scene, they were putting in new mobile home parks everywhere, like all over the place. They were just going in like crazy. And there was manufacturers of mobile homes all over the place, and they were busting these things out, tons of them. So they had economies of scale. So they were making them cheap and just knocking them out. And so what happened would be is that if you bought one, let's say you bought one in the 80s and you had it for 5, 7 years, and you're like, all right, I'm ready to upgrade, downgrade, whatever. And you went to sell it, you were always, I mean, always competing with new mobile homes that were coming out at very competitive prices. And since they're always so 'cause the reason why, and so that was happening, and since they're always adding new parks, it was always an oversupply, right? So what happens when there's an oversupply of an asset, right? price drops. Simple economics, right? So what happened then? There's been a shift, and that shift from about that early 2000s, and this happened all over the United States, is that mobile home parks became out of favor. They're like, you know what? We don't want these anymore. And so all of us, all the investors who are trying to put in mobile home parks were getting denied. And try to put in a mobile home park these days. In the last 20 years, it's been near impossible. Now you might have got an RV park put in, but a mobile home park, 99% of the time, it's a solid no. So what that's done, it's like it's restricted the market big time. Okay. And so that has cut off supply. Well, what else has happened in the last 20 years? Affordable housing, right? So like this need for it, the lack of affordable housing, it's just, the prices of everything. It's just like it's been nuts. And so that's caused a lot of people to consider the most affordable homes in a city, an area, township, whatever. And what are the most affordable homes in your town? I know the answer, and you know too. It's mobile homes, right? There's a mobile home park somewhere around you, and they have the cheapest housing in town. Okay. Now, at least to acquire them, right? So that's been the trend. And so now you've just had all some supply has been restricted and demand has exploded, and that's why these assets which always used to devalue, you know, are not devaluing like they were. They're kind of following the same kind of trends as most real estate. The other thing that happened too in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s when the supply was high and everyone knew when it's time to sell them, you would not be, you weren't going to get much for it because you're always competing with new. It meant that people didn't put any money into them. Nobody fixed them up. I mean, it was pretty rare because it was just unless you were sure as all can be that you were never moving until you died, you never really fixed it up, right? And so now that these parks are been, the supply of new parks have been cut off, then it means that these assets, we're getting old, right? And they haven't been fixed up, but there's a demand for them, and so that's why I can come in, you can come in, and easily find a mobile home that needs a lot of love. And if you do fix it up and make it nicer, it's going to be worth significantly more. Now, every place in the United States is different, right? Housing costs, what even you can buy for a new mobile home, all that kind of stuff changes from state to state, area to area. But overall, like this is why this trend, this asset class used to be not the best bet, but now it is. Now, it's already really popular in the investment world to kind of own mobile home parks. Ever since the word got out that the number one investor of mobile home parks is Warren Buffett, he sees the writing on the wall, seen it for a while. Um, but so it's getting more popular, to own the parks. The problem is they're really heavily, like management nightmares. And so I just do individual houses and then I'm the bank on them. And that's what I'm going to get to here next. Okay, so first off, I was like, the debt's bad. Then I found mobile homes, and then I figured out how to become the bank because I already knew seller financing. I was doing creative financing in the early 2000s because I was trying to get into real estate investing back then. And I didn't I didn't have any money. So what did I do? But I was good at like learning and figuring things out. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to study these investors. I'm going to read these books. I'm going to figure this out. So I was already doing creative financing, sub two, all the bunch of seller financing stuff. And as a real estate broker, this I use this as a tool all the time because most agents, I'm telling you, 99% of them don't even know how to deal with owner financing, right? But this was one of my ways I can set myself apart because I would say, all right, well, if you have, I sold a lot of luxury homes, and I was like, you can try to get this $2 million price, but really it's looking like it should be at 1.6. However, if you offered owner financing, you might be able to get that. And so if we end up doing I did a lot of owner financing on that side of things. And so it's really familiar with them in lots of different ways because it's a way to sell hard to sell properties. And if you're on the selling side, it's a way to get more money and, lots of advantages. But the problem was I did them in 2006, 2007, 2008. And what happened to them once the market crashed? All my borrowers defaulted. I mean, not all of them, but most of them. And that was part of the things that crippled me and crippled so many of my people that were, who were also doing that strategy at that time. And it was hard, hard lesson. And you learned about foreclosures are way harder than evictions. And I was like, man, alive. That's not something I want to revisit anytime soon. So, but when I started flipping these mobile homes, one of the disadvantages about mobile homes is that banks don't want to finance them, right? They don't want to finance them. So, you know, people would ask me, it's like, I love the house, but I can't get the financing. Will you own or finance it? And I'm like, too much PTSD there. But I was curious. A mobile home inside of a park is personal property. Does that, so it's not real property, which means it isn't, doesn't mean it's probably not going to have to follow the same kind of foreclosure laws for the state. Huh. I wonder what it's like to foreclose on a personal property, like this. So I, you know, asked for a meeting with the number one foreclosure attorney in my state. Happened to be a friend of mine from he used to come on my radio show. I'm like, hey, Mark, how do you figure this? Like, what does this look like? And he said, you know, it's it's actually similar. It's a different process than an eviction, but it's a similar timeline, maybe a little bit longer, like a week or two longer. It just depends on where you can get a court date. Like I said, what's the worst case scenario? Like, walk me through it. I mean, like, this the worst case scenario. And man, it just wasn't that bad. And I was like, oh, so I can bypass the total brain damage of a normal foreclosure and do something closer to an eviction to, if I have someone default on one of these loans. He's like, yeah. And I was like, wow, what else should I not need to know about? I was like, and then I said, well, what if I'm the lender on this and if it's in a park, if the if the borrower stops paying their um, lot rent, can the park come after me? You know? And I was like, and there's like, they might. And I was like, ooh, I don't like that at all. He's like, but the problem will be in default with you, so you might as well just victim and then put somebody else in. And you're like, you're right. So I tried one and it was great. I was selling a larger one. The people put down 30 grand. And that was the first one I did. And I have that one still, and they've never been late. In fact, they always pay early. It's like I got lucky on the first one. They were just like perfect. And and so that set me, and I was like, wow, that worked out pretty good. Problem is, I got a bunch of rehab and acquisition costs in this thing. It's like I can't do another one unless I go out and make some more money. And so, I already learned that they're easy to repossess like this. Eviction style process is it's not that big a deal. And it's fast, it's inexpensive, it's practical. Well, and then, it's so there's a real opportunity here if I can figure this out. Because here's this asset. Here's the most affordable home in your community, and the banks won't touch it. The banks will give you a loan for your house, your car, your motorcycle, your boat, your four-wheeler, and your scooter, maybe, but they won't give it to you for your mobile home. And so, and there's some old reasons why, but they just don't like being in second position of that lot rent. They don't like that. And so anyway, so this creates this opportunity. So I was like, wow, if I solve this could be really interesting. And because, you know, I just need to figure out how to, and I could maybe get some loans from people, but I'm like, I'm not doing that again. And so how do I actually do this? So I need capital, and so I just figured out it's like, well, what if I already this thing's already making money. It's just every month. What if I just, go out to one of the people that I know who's normally invests in real estate and say, hey, I got this one done. It's cash flowing this much money. If you come in at, and that for that first example, I had him come in at $100,000 because I sold the property for 170, he put down 130, and I think I was in it for 90,000. This is a big one, a big house. And so that cashed me out 10 grand and, extra. And I gave him a chunk of the cash flow. And it was just like, wow, that's nice. Now I'm making infinite returns and they're happy because they could own an investment property. They didn't have to do the work. They didn't have to find it. They didn't have to go through the brain damage of getting bank loans. They didn't have to do anything. It's like there's no repairs, there's no maintenance. I'm handling it if there is, an issue with the people not paying. So like they don't have to do anything. They're completely passive. And so they're super happy and they're making 12% on their money. So they're like, that's what the loan amount was. And great, everyone's happy. So I've since now have done that over and over and over again, a couple dozen times. And that produces for me personally 90,000 a year in passive income. Do I ever have to spend any time on it? Only when I have a borrower who's late and I gotta like check in with them. Have I had to foreclose on any of these 24? No. And there's a secret to this because I'll never have to probably because there's this really interesting thing that I learned in this process is that because there's lot rent, which is the thing that we all hate, right? Nobody likes lot rent. The borrower doesn't like it. Investors don't like it. Ugh. But it is a great positioning for the bank, even though the banks don't like it. I love it. Here's why. Before my payments even due, because I kind of treat it like a normal mortgage, right? I give them a little bit more time to get it in, after the first, just like your mortgage is. But the thing is that the lot rent is like due on the third or the fifth or whatever. And if you don't pay, they're putting a notice on the door. They're all over you to get that paid. And so they will start giving you notices and basically it's pay or get out. It's what they say. They don't care if what your situation or how much your house is worth. If you're not paying your lot rent, you either got to move this house out of here, or just leave, right? Because you're in violation of, you're not paying it. And so what the park does is they do a super fast foreclosure on them. It's super fast, right? So I never have to do anything because if they're struggling to pay me, they're struggling to pay the lot rent, right? Like they have some sort of, issue, something happens in their life and they're struggling to pay their bills, right? So the lot rent is just, and if they're late with their lot rent, they're in default with me anyway. So it just happens super fast. And so I could get a hold of them and I can be their advocate, not like the landlord, not the big old bank, but the advocate's like, hey, do you guys have a plan to get caught back up? Because this is going to get ugly really fast. Here's what it looks like. They're going to file what the process that they do is they file a like an eviction, because it's like a lease. And if they file that eviction notice, to get you to take action, is that that goes on your record. And if you lose this house, that's terrible. But what's even worse is that you're not going to find anything else. You're not going to get approved to get any other apartment, no house, because no one's going to let you in if you have that eviction on your credit, on your history. And so that is, I tell them like, you can't let that happen. It's just going to be devastating. The only thing you can do from here on out is go live in an RV. Like that's your only option because no one's going to approve you. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing for it to happen to somebody. So I'm like, dude, you got to figure this out. So I give him some options like get a roommate, do something, like figure it out quick, because this you got limited time to sort this out. If you can't, because the main thing is to avoid that eviction, with them. And I can try to work with them a little bit, but I can't stop this part from taking their action. And so I said, unless, if you can't figure it out, then you could try to, you can list it for sale and I can help you with that because I can offer financing to the next person and help you sell it faster, but that's still going to take a while. So if that's not in the cards, then the other option is it's not great, but it's going to save you from this really negative thing is I'll take the house back. I will take over the lot rent and stop that from negatively impacting you. And as long as you hand over the house in a, decent condition, it's not full of damage or whatever, then I will, then forgive this debt that you have. So I come in as a hero. I help them out. And I get the house back, resell, I get another down payment for somebody, and put somebody else in. So I've done that 3 times. And so that's what'll likely happen if you do this strategy. So that's why it's a total game changer. And so what everyone looks as a negative, I've found it to be a positive. So anyway, so and my partners, like I said, they're winning just like I am. I'm going to show you if you haven't seen it, if you're new here, if you haven't seen my spreadsheet of how I actually of my 24 properties and what that looks like, I'll show it to you. Just be sure, because it's real. I'm not making this stuff up. But they're kind of building their own pension, like I'm building it. I'm trying to build a real estate pension, this thing that my parents have a pension. I was talking about this idea with my kids, and they're like, and their friends, they were over, and they're like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I basically help people build real estate pensions." They're like, "What's a pension?" That's what they said. What's a pension? And it's mean that word is dying because the only person who's getting people are getting pensions anymore. If you work for the military, the government, the state, basically, you're looking for the public sector, you might get a pension still. If you work in the private sector, forget about it. Nope, doesn't exist anymore. So, but my parents have been retired now for 20 some years. They don't have a huge pension, but it's a decent one. And it's allowed them to kind of like enjoy retirement without the financial stress. And that's really a cool thing. And I was like, man, I want that. And so this is what I've gone about trying to do. And this is what I'm helping my partners do. Because now I have partners who are making good income, right? I have one like an architect and he's like, he's rolling in it right now. And he's like, all right, I got money for another one. I got money for another one. Because he can just drop money in and he's making 12%. It's hitting back and he's actually doing it in his Roth IRA. And then, so it's earning, tax free. And then because he's not needing the income right now, he's taking that 12% returns and then he's reinvesting it. So he's making over 20% on his money. And so it's like he's like, I couldn't be happier. Like I'm just gonna keep feeding you money, because this is completely passive. He doesn't have any headaches. I have one property. I just talked to him the other day because I saw him at a charity event, and he's like, I was like, yeah, we got this one person who's struggling. I might have to, swap them out. He's like, okay, I'm just glad you're taking care of it. I'm like, yeah, I'm taking care of it. So they can, and he had his money in like CDs and he had it in some funds and he had it in these different things. He's like, I was always nervous that, something was going to change or tank. And I'm so not worried about it anymore. So the way that, JV partnerships work, the way that I do it anyway, is that you have the operator, you have the person who's like me, like you can learn this, right? Where you can be the operator. People I'm helping, do this. I call them like my students or my mentees and whatever, right? You're the active investor, okay, initially, and you're going to have a passive partner, the capital partner, okay, who I sometimes call them pension bankers. They're kind of banking my pension, but then they're building their own at the same time, right? And so they're the passive side, you're the active side. You're finding the deal, you're putting it together, you're finding, you're putting all the pieces together, you're doing all the stuff, and they just have the money, okay? And the asset, of course, is the mobile home. And so you basically the model in action, you can you can go out and find one of these deals, you flip it. You don't always need a lot of rehab, but sometimes these need to be cleaned up because there's a lot of motivated sellers in mobile homes. I could talk all day about this, but there's just so many motivated sellers because people have financial hiccup and they can't pay the lot rent and they have that fast foreclosure on them, and they could lose everything because they can't afford to move the house out of the park. There's no place to move it. It's going to cost them over 10 grand to do that, and they don't have any money. So it's like it's a fast foreclosure. It's terrible. And so there's a lot of motivated sellers out there. And so you find a deal, you save, and you help them, avoid losing everything, and you give them some money, and you take over the property, and you clean it up, have it painted if need be. You decide how you want to do your business, but that kind of thing. You offer seller financing, capital partners, buys the note, so they come in and they usually sell it. It's called like a partial, right? Sell like a partial of the note. So if the note's for 50,000, you're in it for, let's say 25,000. You can bring in your capital partner at 25 and cash you out, or you can bring them at 35 and now you get 10 grand cash and they just get a little bit more of the cash flow. And depending on how much they come in, kind of determines how much percentage of the cash flow they get and how much you get. It's really not complicated. You can keep this simple. And so you split the income depending on how, how you set it up. And so the advantages here are amazing, right? So there's no loans, there's no debt, there's nothing that's going to sink our ship here, right? There's no tenants, right? We're the bank, so they don't call us if things aren't working. They don't call us if there's a problem. They're buying it, right? You don't call Wells Fargo when you have a problem with your house. You'd like to, but you don't, right? And, it's predictable income. Guys, this is the thing, right? Is that if you get so many of these stacked up, this is really highly diversified and a way for you to not have to like worry about money anymore. You get enough of these in, it's like creating that pension. And then, of course, I don't know how many closings I've been to where the borrower, the people I'm helping buy these homes who didn't think they're going to buy a home are like in tears because they're so excited that they get to own something. It's it's really awesome. And they come to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you've been looking everywhere. I can't even believe this is real." And they have all these questions because like, is this real? Like, because it's a nice house and I'm offering for sale, and they're paying less than they'd pay in rent, to rent the same kind of house, and they get to own this. And so they're just ecstatic. So this is the deal, right? So people are like, well, how do I find a partner, right? And and so it's not as hard as you think. Here's the thing about the advantage of doing it the way that I figured out how to do it, right? If you follow a model similar to mine, one of the advantages is these mobile homes are not very expensive, right? Now, I live in an area that's kind of expensive now, right? I've sold mobile homes for 150, 170. My average after put it back on the market is probably around 80 or 90. Uh, The most I paid for one though is about 67, 70. I've gotten them from zero. I've gotten plenty for under 10,000 because these distress sales out there. I said the average acquisition price for me is, I don't know, 15, 25, something like that. But I get some for way less. So if you think about it, you got your acquisition there, and then the rehab can be 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever. It decides how much you want to do to it. Um, but the likelihood, it's so much easier to find an investment partner to come in at 25,000 or, find a partner who has 25,000 sitting in some account, some savings account, some CD, some fund, whether it's in their 401k, whether it's in their, they got an IRA, they're just sitting there in some sort of thing. And this is like completely passive. They basically, what they acquire is a note, a mortgage note. And most of the ones that I do are 30, but you can do them for 20 or 15 or whatever. Um, and the way that I set it up for my partners too, because a lot of times they're older and they're like, well, Mike, I'm not going to be around in 30 years. And I'm like, right? So, it's like the point being, so it either it's going to go to your state, but by the way, if you want out, if you want your money back, you just let me know. If like in a couple of years you need your money for a big medical thing or whatever, no problem. You know, all I have to do is find somebody else who wants to make 12% on their money. I swap them out. So the way I set it up is really easy. I just create a JV partnership, which I do through an LLC. It's like I'm a member, they're a member, and so it's like we have shares. So depending on how much you came in with, kind of depicts like, okay, you came in at 60,000, you're gonna get 60 shares, and I'm gonna keep 40 shares on this $100,000 note, right? It's not that hard. Okay. Um, and I said, so anytime you can sell your shares. I probably have a waiting list, or you can go out and find anybody else you know who wants to make this kind of return on their money. And there is people who want to make this income because not is it a good rate, it comes to them every month. It's not like invest it and hope in 10 years you're going to get a return. It comes back to you every month. You can live off that money. I just talked to a gal who I helped buy a house a couple years ago, and she's like, "Hey, Mike, I saw one of your emails. I have 100,000. I want to put to work. I need to have some sort of steady income. That like I don't have any income. It's kind of causing an issue." I'm like, "Yeah, all right. We put it into a property. You could probably make $1,000, on that kind of, with that kind of money." She's like, "That would be great. That sounds awesome." I'm like, "Okay, I'll put you on my list." And so she's on my list. I'm going to help her sell, acquire a property and now have something like an annuity, right? It's kind of similar to an annuity where you put the money in and just pays you out as much and she can sell that at any time. Um, I might take that 100,000 and divide it up over two, maybe even three properties, depending on what comes available at what price point. So, um, So that's what do you think? It's not that hard to find people that have you're willing to invest 20, 25,000, 30,000. So what I help people do is kind of like you just have to be able to explain it, right? And have them watch one of my videos, right? Or get them onto one of my calls. I actually set up, even, like with my people in my mentors group, is like, hey, if you meet somebody who's might be interested, but they're on the fence, hey, let's set up a three-way call. I'll jump on with them. Because sometimes it's just being able to understand it a little bit better, right? Just to understand it. So that, and so you might have family members, you might have somebody in your church, you might have somebody that it's in your neighborhood that a colleague, uh, like somebody at work or something. You'd be surprised how many people have that kind of money saved up and they're just looking for it. I go to these like investor meetups places and there's people with some money that they want to invest and they're thinking they need to go out and buy a fix and flip and get a bank loan and do all these things. And I ask them, well, what's your goal? It's like, well, I want to earn some, passive income. I'm like, okay, good. You can avoid all that risky stuff. Avoid it all, right? I already got a deal done. I've done all the work. It's making great cash flow. I'm going to let you in on it. That's the key. I'm not trying to get them to partner with me. I'm going to let them in on the opportunity. It's total change, right? Hey, I'm doing this. Do you want in? And so that's the way you kind of approach it. Somebody might ask you like, "Hey, what are you up to right now?" Like, I'm actually, working hard on the side of it, setting up these cash flow investments, these passive cash flow. And I'm learning this strategy through being the bank on mobile homes of all things, because banks don't lend on this, but it turns out like they're a great way to set up invest, long-term passive income because you get all the benefits of being the bank. We don't have to do repairs and maintenance and all that stuff. And at the same time, um, we don't have to go through the whole painful foreclosure process if somebody stops paying. So it's all the benefits, it's not all the negatives. And they might say, well, don't those things devalue over time? They used to. And you tell them that whole supply demand thing, right? So it's like you got to just have a little bit in your knowledge, and then it's not hard to do this. Anyway, if you want help, doing this stuff, if you're not already in my I actually have a school, couple school communities, right? So one of them is I have now, you can get in for free right now. It's called my Mobile Home Investment Club. Let me show you. So this is the school community. You can go here. It's called Mobile Home Investing Community. Um, and it's, it's school.com/MH investing. Okay. And you come in here, there's like 1,000 people in here, and you can jump in. It says settings for me right here, but this is where it'd say join, and you can join. So most of the people, even on this call, might already be in here. I have made some recent changes. It used to be called cash flow flips because that's kind of this model I've been talking about. This is like my main bread and butter. But I'm finding that mobile home investing is great in lots of different ways. Let me just show you that so this is my pension. Okay, so this is Mike's pension, right? I mentioned I have 24 properties, so this is my, I got my 24 properties here. Let me make this a little bigger so you can see. And so I have lots of, numbers in here because I really love numbers, right? And tracking everything. But this is how much my actual net take home is. It's like I don't have any money invested in all these properties. In fact, I'm in up 20,000. I used to like have money and partially invest in these things, and now I get cashed out in all of them. And then so I'm making this net that, this is what I make this is my part of my pension right now, which is basically 87,000 a year. I can see these are recent. I've been taking off the last few months to kind of get this school and my mentor group, lined up, but I've just started acquiring more properties now, and I'll have a few more rolling out here pretty soon. And but the cool part is that when you set up these mortgages, you're really setting up 30 years of passive income. Now they won't all go 30 years, obviously, but they'll probably turn over and you set it up for another 30 years, and they'll turn over and you set it up for another 30 years. You turn it over and like, oh, we got to invest a little bit of money in this one to get it going again. All right, all right. And then you get recouped from that cost from the next borrower's down payment, and then you go on again. Yeah, so it's like, but it's cool. As I love about this number is like, so I get scheduled to be paid out 2.6 million. I love looking at that number because it's like, dang, I finally did something right. And my investor partners, they're scheduled out this 3.6. Ultimately, the gross amount of or the net amount that before I split it up between my investor partners is 18,000. So if you had your own money and you're going to do this, if you're going to be an active investor in all these and set it yourself, like if I invested my own money, it would cost me about $1 million to set this up. But instead, I've gotten $1 million from my JV partners. Nicknamed them, my pension bankers. So but this is still an amazing return. If you think about that 1% rule, I'm crushing it, right? Right? I'm doing really well. I'm almost at the 2%, right? And so, and it's completely passive. It's not all the rental headaches. So, this model is really amazing. But that's not the only way to make money in mobile homes. Like this over here is the green column here. I scroll down here. Now this is my mobile home flips. And, um, I'm actually this is what my net has been on my mobile home flips that I've done. And, I'm averaging really good returns on those. Now I'm really good. And so even if you're making 10 or 15 grand at flip, awesome, right? That's good money. Um, and so I'm just really good at the whole process. So it helps me get a little bit higher amounts, and my market's kind of set up for it. But I teach, like there's 7 different ways that I kind of teach different ways people make money on mobile homes. So long story short, um, I uh, I I rebranded this club, the Mobile Home Investing Club, because this is what I end up talking about most of the time. There's different ways to invest in mobile homes because people get interested and are like, wow, but it's hard to start with cash flow flips. It's hard to start with getting partners sometimes, right? Now, if you're good at doing that, do that. So I show people different ways to get into mobile home investing in lots of different ways. And so we end up talking about that, strategizing about that. And I've learned some cool things from people in this community, right? And so if you're gonna get in here, I have these different free courses and stuff, and I'm constantly changing this stuff. But I got live training recordings like this, and then how to find bargains, and then some case studies, and then I do have a one time, the way I've set it up now is to get people in for free. And but if you want some more premium courses, I have a one time, you pay once and you get unlock all these stuff in blue where you can get my master class, which is like 7, 8 hours of me just going in through every step, every process, that I can think of that I do, just trying to share every little nitty gritty. And then I do have, of course, my coaching and support, my mentorship group. So that's called Cash Flow Flips. That was what I mentioned here in our presentation. This is Cash Flow Pro is my pro group, right? So in my pro group, what this looks like is I've changed this model a few different times. It basically the cost it's basically you get a full-time coach for a whole year for 3,000. Now, normally I would charge, a couple grand a month for to be your coach, but I just say, you know what? Um, I'm going to do it this way to help it make it be more approachable, right? So what I do is I have office hours every day where people can call and contact me. If you can't reach that, I give you my cell phone. We can schedule another call, if anything time sensitive. But essentially, I just help you get started, figure out these details. And I used to do a by month on this, and I might be able to work out, if you have to do monthly, but I really like the year thing because it takes some time. There is a learning curve, and I want you to get there. I just know I can get you to win over a course of a year, right? So I have like, kind of a year, cost on that. And just to help you start building out your pension and help get you some money and you'll probably, by the way, earn this in your first deal, you'll probably pay for the next 2 or 3 years. If you not that you would need to do it for 2 or 3 years, but I'm saying like your first deal, we should hopefully get, and could get in the first. Yeah, it depends on what strategy you're going for, because I can help you with everything. I've been doing this for so long. I've done all the strategies, by the way. If you're currently doing wholesales, you're doing sub twos, you're a realtor still or whatever, I've been there and happy to help you where you're at to reach your goals. Because sometimes you got to get out of something or you're in the process of something. So I always help meet my people where they're at. But that's what that looks like. You can set up a call with me and see if that's something that makes sense for you. And I always recommend that. Okay. But anyway, the point being is, there is, you're just bombarded by all these different ways to make money. You're bombarded with it. Like, in your feed, you're like, oh, this strategy, this strategy, this strategy, this strategy. And you don't have to pick this one. But here's what I recommend for you. Whatever you're considering adding or changing or doing other than what you're doing now, make sure it meets some criteria, right? And because you got to ask yourself, what do I really want? What do you want? You know, and this is what I did for myself because this helps me kind of figure out where and how I'm going to spend my time. Because ultimately, I know that there's so many things that I want to do and try, and there's so many ways to make money. But I keep having to remind myself, like, Mike, you can go chase that, but not until you finish your pension, because that solves all the riddles. If you can do something that gives you passive income for decades, forget about it. Like that is the holy grail of money, right? It means you don't have to worry about it anymore. You don't have to spend time on it anymore. And if whatever you're pursuing, doesn't like provide that, because wholesaling, it's a constant game of trying to find the next tier, constantly hunting, 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 and these deals, like, if you have a lot of debt, right? That's the thing. Like, yeah, you might be making money on it, but and then like the Airbnb stuff is cool, but you can hire people to manage it, but then the city changes their rules, and then all of a sudden that gets weird. Like, there's just, it's the same thing for business. If you own a business, the best thing to do to eventually, right, is to get to basically work your way out of it, right? So it works without you. That's when you own a true business, but no, it's so rare that people do that. And then business is constantly turning and changing unless you're lucky enough to have like a software company where people just love it and stay for decades, then you might have that. But this is a really cool way to build lasting financial income. And it's not harder than any of these other methods that I've been talking about. It's different, but it's not harder. There is a learning curve, but it's not any harder than the other thing else that you're looking at. So we can, right? And I'm working on ways to make it easier for people. For example, I show you how to get JV partners and stuff. I can help you work through that part, so you have funding partners, have funding. And the other thing you can do, but I'm working on providing funding for you. And so that's only going to be given to my mentees because I'm taking people that already fund me and say, hey, you trust me. I'm working with this person over here. I'm helping them vet their deal and make sure it's good. I'm helping them through all the steps so we can make sure it's set up correctly. And therefore, I can give them confidence. I can getting, so I'm basically using my reputation to help get funding for you. So I'm working on that. And I'm working on the details of that right now. So I have a couple people open to it. I just need to figure out the right structuring that makes sense for everybody. At the same time, I'll still show you how you do it on your own, you know, because I always like to show people how to fish so they don't need any other, service. But I know if I solve this riddle, it's going to help everybody because funding is sometimes the trickiest part. As we're learning, though, it's just being able to articulate to your potential partners about the opportunity and helping them get through whatever the concerns they have, and then it's not that hard. Okay, all right. So I don't see any in the chat, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap. Thank you guys for being a part of tonight's presentation. Message me if you have anything you want to follow up or any questions, if you didn't want to, jump in. But it was cool to kind of go through this with you guys and just, yeah, reach out if you have questions. Talk soon.